I'm going to start at section 2 of the Adobe Certification Outline, Project Setup and Interface, and we'll talk about choosing appropriate project settings for a video. And the first key concept is project location on Drive. So I have a project open here I've been editing. I'm going to File, New, Project. I'm going to start a new project. So project location on Drive. Where is this new project I'm going to make? And we'll call it Adobe Certification. I'll just call it that for simplicity. And where is this project going to be located on my drive? This is a review. Remember, browse. I'm going to choose I'll just choose desktop. So even though I have all this stuff on my desktop, this file is going to land on my desktop. Actually, you know what? No, I have a Jake folder. I'll select my Jake folder. Okay, so it's desktop, Jake. That's the last thing highlighted. It's going to end up in the Jake folder. Okay, so that's the last thing highlighted. I don't have any folders within the Jake folder highlighted. Only the Jake folder is highlighted. So I'm clicking Choose. And you can see it again. Users, Jake Rose on my desktop, the Jake folder. That's where this Adobe certification file is going to land. Now our next key concept, scratch disks, since I'm already here. So let's talk about scratch disk and what is a scratch disk. As you create your video and make your edits and your fades and your transitions, it has to create those new fades and transitions. It has to create what they look like, and it has to store that new information. Where does that new information go as you work? That's what's called a scratch disk, meaning that's the disk, that's the hard drive disk that Premiere saves new information to. So I'm going to leave all these as same as project, meaning that the scratch disk where Premiere will store new information being created as I work on my project will be located in the same folder that I stored my project in. Users, Jake Rose, desktop, Jake. Obviously, not obviously, well, you can see here I could change it if I wanted to. So let's say I'm capturing new video, right? Or which we don't use that feature because we do a lot of SD drive transfer. So let's just maybe ignore that for a minute and go down to video previews. So but that means when any video effect you create, including fade outs, fade ins and fade outs, or just your fades or your dissolves, it has to make new video for that fading stuff. So if I went to browse and I clicked music video and I hit choose, notice now instead of saying Jake, it says users, Jake Rose, desktop, Jake, music video. That means that any new video information that it needs to create for this new project I've created called Adobe Certification will be stored in the music video folder within my folder. That's probably not a good idea unless you have a specific reason for it, okay? So a lot of times I just leave it as same as project. When you leave it as same as project, it gets saved to wherever your project is going. That's a good way to do it. Unless you're working with separate hard drives, which we're not doing in this class. Playback engine. Okay, some tasks of the software can use the video card to quickly create graphics and transitions and things. If you go to software only, it will not use your video card to help the computer go faster. You would select this if you do not have a compatible video card. These computers all actually do have a decent video card that can help make Premiere a little faster, so we leave that on. Okay, that is the playback engine or the video rendering and playback. Let's talk about ingest settings, which won't be able to be enabled because we don't have encoder, but this is generally for taking in ingest. So you're importing footage in the background while you work on larger productions where you have footage coming in from other people while you edit, that kind of thing. Back to general, we have display format. Timecode is this stuff here. It's those hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Now maybe you don't want hours, minutes, seconds, and frames displayed while you work, and you want, say you're working originally with film, right? 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. Then you do this, and it would show you the amount of feet of film. But we don't. That's increasingly rare, of course. And then frames is literally, we'll just count frames, where if you're at the beginning of your sequence, it'll say 0. If you go to the end, it'll count how many frames you have, right? So for example, let me just cancel. And you can actually change it in a current project. I'll go frames, watch. 0, and at the end 6. So yeah, it's kind of cool though, because I know my entire project here is 1644 frames. So lastly, we have sequence settings. So I'm in a project here. I'm going to go to sequence settings. Now, these are the settings that affect my sequence. This particular sequence. I have other sequences, but my sequence settings affect the sequence I have selected. Now, sequence, timeline, same thing. Timeline, sequence, sequence, timeline. Okay? And this is set at certain settings. That's why when you're already working on a video and you bring in like a cell phone or an image from the internet, it doesn't quite fit. Either it's way too big or way too small. That's because this window here is set to, let's see over here, here's my settings, 1920 by 1080, which is standard HD. Pixel ratio, don't worry too much about that. Color space, that's a certain kind of color for a certain kind of display. Rec 709 is what we use in North America. Okay, don't worry too much about all these details, but just know that this is set to a certain setting. The first thing you import typically into a timeline is what it automatically sets to. So I'll just mess with this and watch what happens if I change this. I'll make this something random, like I'll make this 4,000 and I'll make this 500. Something really goofy, okay? I'm gonna hit okay. Now it's gonna give me a warning. Because I'm gonna lose my, remember we talked about scratch disks, so when your computer creates new information for stuff? Well, now I'm in a new sequence setting, so all that stuff becomes irrelevant. So it's warning me that all that's about to be deleted. I'm gonna hit OK. Oh, and look what happened. It's a goofy size. Because this footage is of one size, but I made my sequence of another size, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and change that back. Sequence settings. I'm gonna go to 1920 by 1080, which is standard HD, which is what I recorded this in. Okay. Yeah. And look, how magical. My sequence perfectly matches my original video. So that's sequence settings.